There are people who crave touch not out of desire, but out of absence. They don't want bodies. They want proof. Proof that they still matter. Proof that someone still sees them. Carl Jung said that when love becomes unconscious, it turns into compulsion. And nowhere is that more visible than in the human search for intimacy. For some, sex isn't an act of passion. It's an attempt to fill the hollow spaces left by emotional starvation. They mistake closeness for connection and attention for affection. They give their body hoping someone will finally touch their soul. But Jung warned that anything we seek externally to avoid our inner emptiness becomes addictive. Desire becomes a ritual, not of pleasure, but of self-forgetting. Each encounter is a temporary escape from loneliness, followed by a deeper silence when it's over. These are the people who say, "It's just physical," but secretly ache for something sacred. They chase validation disguised as lust, and they call it freedom. But it's not freedom. It's dependence wrapped in pleasure. Behind this pattern lies something deeper, what Jung called the anima and animus, the inner masculine and feminine forces within every psyche. When one is wounded or suppressed, we begin to seek that missing energy through others. We don't fall in love with people. We fall in love with what they awaken in us. So when a person feels unloved within, they crave someone who can mirror back the love they cannot yet give themselves. But the tragedy is that sex can only imitate love. It cannot replace it. You can touch skin without ever touching the self. You can kiss someone who's already gone. You can share a bed and still feel completely alone. People who use sex to feel loved often come from emotional droughts, families where affection was rare, where love was something earned through perfection or performance. They learned that to be desired is the closest thing to being accepted. So they keep searching for that high of being chosen, again and again, even if it costs their peace. Afterward, the silence hurts the most. It's the moment they realize the warmth they felt wasn't love. It was temporary relief. And that relief fades faster every time. So they go back, searching again, needing more, chasing less satisfaction. It's a loop of intimacy without connection, closeness without safety, pleasure without meaning. Jung said, "No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." And this is their hell, confusing being wanted with being worthy. It's the unconscious belief that the body is the only part of them lovable enough to be seen. But underneath that behavior lives a quiet soul that doesn't want sex. It wants sanctuary. It wants to be held, not for the thrill of the moment, but for the comfort of existence. It wants someone who won't just touch their skin, but understand their silence. And until that soul is met, every encounter will feel both too much and not enough. Because what they truly seek is not passion, it's peace. Some people think the opposite of love is hate. Jung would disagree. He would say the opposite of love is emptiness, the inner silence left behind when the heart hasn't been seen for too long. And when that emptiness becomes unbearable, the body becomes a language, a way of saying, "Please don't leave me unseen." People who use sex to feel loved rarely know that's what they're doing. On the surface, they look confident, liberated, even detached. They say things like, "It doesn't mean anything," or "I'm just having fun." But underneath the surface is something quieter, an ache that never really goes away. In Jung's work, this behavior comes from a disconnection between the ego and the self. The ego seeks approval. The self seeks wholeness. When we lose touch with the self, we start using the body to negotiate worth. We try to buy emotional safety with physical closeness. And for a moment, it works. For a few hours, you feel chosen, seen, desired. But the moment ends and the silence returns, louder than before. Many people who live in this pattern grew up in conditional love. They learned that affection had a price, that they had to perform to be valued, whether it was being beautiful, useful, obedient, or impressive. So, as adults, they carry that belief into intimacy. If I give enough, they'll stay. If I'm desirable enough, I'll finally be loved. It's not vanity. It's trauma disguised as charm. And Jung would say that repression is the seed of compulsion. When you repress emotional hunger, it doesn't disappear. It mutates. It becomes the craving for intensity. Sex becomes the easiest form of intensity, the most immediate way to feel alive. You confuse being wanted for being known. And that confusion grows into a cycle of craving and regret. Think of how many people feel closer to someone during the night than they do the next morning. Because night offers illusion. The world is quiet, boundaries blur, and for a few hours, two people can pretend they're whole. But when morning light hits, truth returns. Desire fades. You can't sustain love built on emptiness. It always collapses into distance. Jung called this the projection of the anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine archetypes. When you haven't integrated those parts within yourself, you project them onto others. You search for your missing piece in someone else's body. You make them the mirror of your longing. You mistake their attention for salvation. But projection never lasts. It breaks the moment reality enters. You can't keep loving an illusion once you see the person behind it. That's why so many people end up chasing intensity instead of intimacy. Because intensity feels like love, but doesn't require vulnerability. It feels safe to give your body when giving your heart feels dangerous. You can control sex. You can't control love. So people who fear abandonment keep choosing physical closeness. It's love that can't leave first. Jung would say that this cycle ends only when you face the shadow, the part of you that doesn't want sex, but wants reassurance, the part that still feels unworthy of being loved without effort. When you face that truth, desire loses its desperation. You stop using people to feel valuable. You stop calling attention affection. You start craving honesty more than chemistry. And here's where the modern world makes it harder. Social media rewards surfaces. Dating apps turn connection into choice paralysis. Everyone performs desirability while starving for authenticity. It's the perfect environment for people who mistake validation for love. Jung would call it a collective shadow, a society addicted to stimulation because it's terrified of silence. But the silence is where truth lives. If you sit in it long enough, you realize that what you thought was hunger for touch was really hunger for recognition. You didn't want someone's hands. You wanted their understanding. You wanted someone to look at you and say, "You don't need to prove you're lovable." That's what real intimacy sounds like. And when you finally understand that, something in you softens. You begin to see sex differently. It's no longer an escape. It becomes a form of communication. Not a way to feel loved, but a way to express love. It's no longer about being wanted. It's about being met. Because the truth Jung left us with is this: what you seek in others is always what you've been withholding from yourself. And the moment you stop chasing validation, the right kind of love stops running from you. There always comes a moment when the body stops being enough. When the thrill fades faster than it used to. When every kiss feels familiar, yet strangely empty. That's when the soul begins to whisper, "You're not looking for pleasure anymore. You're looking for home." Carl Jung called this turning point the call of individuation, the process of becoming whole. It begins quietly, with the realization that you're tired of performing desire just to avoid feeling alone. You're tired of chasing warmth that never lasts. And somewhere deep inside, you start craving something you can't name. It's not more attention. It's not even love. It's truth. For people who have used sex to feel loved, this is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because the old pattern finally stops working. Liberating because for the first time, you're no longer willing to betray yourself for connection. Jung believed that every compulsion hides a message, and the message behind sexual dependency is simple but brutal. You've been searching for someone to give you what you never gave yourself. The body was never the problem. It was the messenger. It was trying to tell you that the longing wasn't for pleasure. It was for acceptance. You didn't want to be touched. You wanted to be seen. When this realization finally sinks in, the healing begins. Because you stop seeking intensity and start seeking safety. You stop looking for partners who make you feel wanted and start noticing the ones who make you feel peaceful. You stop mistaking chaos for passion. You stop confusing being needed with being loved. Jung wrote that every human relationship mirrors our relationship with our own soul. So if your love feels unstable, it's because you are still learning to stay with yourself. The moment you stop abandoning your own heart, you stop attracting those who abandon you too. That's when sex transforms from transaction to transcendence, from distraction to devotion. Real intimacy doesn't begin in the body. It begins in truth. It begins when you stop pretending that desire is love and start allowing love to move through desire. When two people meet from wholeness instead of hunger, touch becomes sacred. The body stops being a tool of validation and becomes a bridge between souls. That's what Jung meant when he spoke of sacred union, not a merging of bodies, but a reconciliation of opposites within. Your inner masculine and feminine energies no longer fight for power. They dance. Your need to be chosen dissolves because you finally choose yourself. It doesn't happen overnight. There will still be moments when you crave the old high, when you want to be desired just to prove you still can be. That's okay. Healing doesn't erase desire. It refines it. It turns horizontal lust into awareness. It turns hunger into presence. One day, you'll meet someone, and this time, you won't reach for them out of emptiness. You'll reach because your fullness wants to connect. You'll touch them not to fill a void, but to share a peace you already found inside yourself. That's when sex becomes what it was meant to be, not a mask for loneliness, but an expression of love without fear. And even if you're alone for a while, you won't feel abandoned, because solitude stops feeling like punishment once you realize it's the space where the soul returns to itself. Jung once said, "Solitude is for those who are whole." The moment you stop running from yourself, you stop mistaking others for salvation. So to those who used their bodies to feel loved, you were never broken. You were just looking for God in the wrong language. You were speaking your need through touch, because no one ever taught you how to say it with truth. But now you know, and knowing is the beginning of freedom, because love was never supposed to be a reward for performance. It was meant to be a reflection of who you already are. You don't have to prove your worth through desire. You don't have to keep giving yourself away to feel enough. You only have to remember what Jung tried to teach us, that the deepest form of love begins when you finally stop searching for it outside of yourself. There comes a time when the body stops being enough. When the nights begin to feel longer, the faces blur, and even pleasure starts to taste like silence. You lie there afterward, and it's not guilt you feel. It's nothingness, a deep, aching quiet that no one warned you about. Carl Jung said that the soul will do anything to be seen, even wear the mask of desire. That's what this pattern really is, a cry for visibility, disguised as lust. You're not addicted to the act itself. You're addicted to what it briefly represents: being wanted, being noticed, being alive. But what happens when being wanted no longer feels like being loved? When every touch feels like repetition instead of revelation? That's when the shift begins. Not all transformations come with light and clarity. Some begin with exhaustion, with a tiredness that finally forces you to stop chasing the same illusion. Jung called this moment the meeting with the shadow. The shadow isn't evil. It's simply everything you've buried. And when you finally look at it, you realize it was never lust that drove you. It was loneliness. It was your hunger to feel chosen. It was your fear of not mattering to anyone. And once you face that fear, desire loses its power to control you. You start to see sex differently. It's no longer a transaction, but a mirror. Every partner reflected what you believed about yourself, how lovable you thought you were, how seen you felt inside. Once you begin to see that, the cycle breaks. Because love without awareness is repetition. But love with awareness becomes transformation. You stop running toward attention and start walking toward authenticity. You stop needing others to confirm your worth because you finally know what you bring into the room. Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. That's the real intimacy you were always seeking. Not physical closeness, but psychological nakedness. To be touched without fear. To be seen without the urge to hide. To be known, not performed." And when that happens, when you finally meet someone after you've met yourself, everything changes. You no longer need them to fill you. You invite them to share with you. Desire becomes gentle. Sex becomes sacred. You start to understand that love was never supposed to burn. It was meant to warm. Even if you find yourself alone for a while, it won't feel empty. Because solitude stops being a punishment once you've met your own soul. It becomes the place where love prepares you for truth. And from that truth, real connection grows, quietly, naturally, without fear. Maybe that's what Jung meant when he said, "No one can make a tree grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." You had to fall into the depths of your own hunger to understand what true love even is. Not the kind that consumes, but the kind that calms. Not the kind that leaves, but the kind that listens. So, if you've ever used sex to feel loved, don't blame yourself. You weren't broken. You were just trying to translate love in the only language you knew. Now you've learned a new one. Silence, awareness, presence. The language of real connection. Because love isn't found in the moment you're touched. It's found in the moment you stop needing to be. Maybe this is your turning point too. Maybe you've reached the place where the noise of wanting finally gives way to the peace of being. Stop chasing those who only touch your body. Start becoming the one who finally understands your soul. Carl Jung once said that the greatest tragedy is to live someone else's story. So write your own, not with desperation, but with awareness, not with hunger, but with grace. If this video found you tonight, maybe it wasn't random. Maybe your soul sent it to remind you that love was never something to find. It was something to remember. Like, comment, and subscribe, not just to support this channel, but to remind yourself that you're done mistaking attention for affection. And tell me in the comments, did you ever realize you were just trying to feel loved, not desired?